What if one of the fastest ways to manifest your desire was to mentally experience it before it even showed up in your reality? That is the gift of visualization. Now, in 2025, researchers reviewed 86 different studies involving more than 3,500 athletes, and they found that mental imagery consistently improved performance. Olympic athletes use it to win competitions, keynote speakers use it to deliver presentations with confidence. Even surgeons use it to improve their accuracy, and people practicing conscious creation also use it to help manifest their desires. So, through visualization, we're able to experience our desires before our physical senses confirm it. And that is why visualization has become one of the most popular manifestation techniques. But here's where people get stuck. They either aren't sure what they're supposed to be visualizing, how they're supposed to visualize it. They're wondering if they're doing it correctly. So in this video, I want to talk about how to approach visualization when it comes to manifesting your desires, what SATS actually is, how to choose the right scene, and most importantly, how to make your imaginal acts feel more real over time. So before we even talk about SATS and imaginal scenes, let's answer an important question. Why even visualize at all? Visualization gives your mind the experience of your desire, and the brain learns through experience and repetition. So think about that. Most people don't struggle to manifest because they lack desire. They struggle because the desire still feels unnatural or unlikely and distant. And according to the law of assumption, we don't manifest what we want. We manifest what feels real and natural to us. So visualization helps bridge that gap. It allows you to temporarily experience a desired reality before you physically experience it. And this matters because, again, the brain learns through experience. In neuroscience, there is a concept called neuroplasticity, which refers to the brain's ability to create and strengthen different neural pathways through repeated thoughts and experiences. So the more frequently you experience something, the more familiar it becomes. So visualization takes advantage of that process. When you repeatedly imagine the same outcome or think the same thoughts, you're creating a mental experience of it. And over time, that experience can become more familiar, more normal, and less foreign. This is one reason that mental rehearsal has been used by elite performers and athletes for centuries. One of the most famous examples is Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps. Now, before races, Phelps would mentally rehearse every aspect of the competition, including any potential problems and exactly how he would solve and respond to those problems to still win the race. Now, during the 2008 Olympics, his goggles actually got filled with water. Thankfully, this was a scenario that he had mentally rehearsed so many times. So instead of panicking, he was able to remain calm and still won the race while also setting a world record, y'all. Because mentally, that situation wasn't unfamiliar. He had already experienced it in his mind's eye and saw himself still winning. And that is the connection to the law of assumption. Visualization isn't powerful because it magically manifests things. It's powerful because it helps make a new reality feel familiar. And when something feels familiar, it becomes easier to think, feel, and identify with the version of yourself who already has it, and that manifests a lot quicker. And that is where visualization becomes such a powerful tool for conscious creation. Now, one of the most popular visualization techniques is called SATS, which stands for state akin to sleep. Is a term popularized by the 20th century mystic Neville Goddard. It is the drowsy state between being fully awake and fully asleep. It is that moment when your body feels super heavy, your mind feels relaxed, and you're no longer paying attention to the outside world. Many people compare this state to the alpha and theta brainwave states that are associated with relaxation, meditation, creativity, and increased suggestibility. So the reason why SATS is so effective is because it becomes easier to immerse yourself in that that experience when your analytical or logical mind begins to quiet down. That's why so many people find it the easiest to visualize either right before they fall asleep, immediately after they wake up, or during deep meditation. But SATS isn't magical. It is simply a state that makes it easier to enter into the experience or the wish fulfilled. And remember, the goal isn't to perform the technique perfectly. The goal is to experience the state of already having what you desire. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to create an entire movie in their minds. They try to imagine every single detail of like a 15-minute scene, but that's usually when the mind starts wandering and you start thinking about what you're going to eat for the next day. It becomes harder to sustain. So instead of experiencing the desire, you are now directing a film. So short scenes solve that problem. Think about one of your most favorite memories. You probably don't remember every single second of an entire day. You remember moments, a hug, a conversation, maybe a text, a celebration. The same principle applies here. A short scene allows you to focus on the sensory vividness. What do you hear right now? What do you feel? What can you see and smell? What are you literally touching? So instead of spreading your attention across dozens of details, you can concentrate it into this single moment that implies that your desire has already been fulfilled. So how do you choose the right scene? This is where I think most people accidentally make visualization harder than it needs to be. They create scenes about getting the desire. But the most effective scenes, I believe, usually happen after the desire has already been fulfilled. So I want you to think about that. If your desire is already a reality, what would feel normal to you? What would simply be a part of your everyday life? One of my most favorite examples comes from the book The Law and the Promise by Neville Goddard. So there was a woman who wanted to marry a man that she met briefly but eventually lost contact with. Now, most people would probably imagine reconnecting. They would imagine receiving a phone call from this person or going on dates or getting proposed to. Instead, she imagined something so much simpler. She imagined laying in bed and feeling a wedding ring on her finger and saying, "I really am Mrs. J.E." So that scene implied everything already happened. The reunion, the relationship, the proposal, the marriage, all of it. She went to the end. Another example involved a man who wanted to win at the racetrack. So instead of imagining the race itself, he imagined handling the winnings after the outcome had already been decided. So again, he skipped over the how and the event and went straight to the fulfilled reality. And perhaps the most famous example is the Barbados story. So when Neville Goddard wanted to return to Barbados but didn't have any money, he didn't imagine finding money. He didn't imagine buying a ticket or someone handing him a ticket. He didn't imagine solving the problem. He imagined sleeping in Barbados, specifically in his father's home. So the desire here had already happened. The problem had already been solved. This is one of the most important principles in visualization. Instead of imagining the manifestation, imagine life after the manifestation. So in one of my videos, I talked about manifesting my dream apartment and I talked about the imaginal scene. Now I tried imagining like signing a lease at the leasing office, didn't do much for me. I tried imagining telling someone that I got the apartment, also didn't do a lot for me. What finally clicked was imagining a normal day after I got my dream apartment. My imaginal scene involved me waking up in my bed in my dream apartment, getting out of bed, and then walking into the living room. That was it. Just a few seconds, but I was able to add so much sensory vividness to it because it was such a normal, everyday scene. So I felt the feeling of my comforter, the cold feeling of the wooden floors, the metal doorknob, the sunlight in my living room. To this day, that scene still feels like a memory, which brings me to my next point. Feeling is the secret. People hear this and they think that they need to force these intense emotions every time they visualize. But what that really means to me is your sensory vividness. So that includes smell, touch, taste, hearing, and sight. So to summarize, the requirements for your scene include implying that the desire is already done and fulfilled. So what happens next? The scene should just be a few seconds long. And number 3, it should involve as much sensory vividness as possible. So at this point, you might be wondering, okay, so how do I make this scene feel real? A lot of people get discouraged because they try to visualize and think, okay, this feels blurry, it feels fake, but that's good, at least in the beginning. Your current assumptions feel natural because you have practiced them for years. You've experienced them repeatedly in your mind or in the 3D. So why would a brand new scene suddenly feel completely natural on day one? It usually won't. And that's okay. The first few times that you visualize a scene, it probably will feel distant or literally lack clarity. But through repetition, something interesting starts to happen. It becomes clearer. The scene becomes easier to enter and the experience becomes more familiar. And eventually, what felt impossible begins to feel normal. This is why I always encourage people to give themselves permission to experiment. Give yourself grace. You may need to try a few different scenes before you find one that finally clicks. Which brings me to my next point. How often should I visualize? Visualize until the desire feels familiar or until it feels natural, until it feels less like a wish and more like a memory. So I recommend visualizing until the desire appears in your reality. But what I don't recommend is turning visualization into homework. So obsessing over whether you've done enough sessions, whether you have visualized enough minutes, obsessing if you miss one night and don't visualize, that is completely missing the point. Remember, we're just trying to create familiarity. I love using visualization, but I know that I don't need to obsess over doing it every single day and every single night. Just when I want to experience or remind myself of the desired state. We're allowing a new state to feel normal. So when the desire pops up in your mind, you can go ahead and visualize a quick scene to remind yourself of the new story that you're telling about this desire or about this thing. Now, here's a pro tip. Always assume that you are doing it right. Always assume that it is working, even if it feels blurry, even if you fall asleep. There are so many times when I'll lay down at night with the intentions of visualizing a scene, and I'll wake up the next day and be like, I don't even remember if I did it. I think I may have fallen asleep 2 seconds in. So what do? I just assume that I did do it and that I did it effectively, because according to the law of assumption, what we assume hardens into facts, even if it's not currently a fact. So if you worry about whether you've done it right or not, definitely stop. We're occupying the state of someone who did do it and who manifests correctly. Ultimately, visualization isn't about creating a perfect scene. It's not a magic trick to get your desire. It's a tool to help you experience it as though it were true today, to normalize it, changing your relationship to the desire and moving from maybe one day to this has already happened. Which brings me to another important point that I don't want to forget. When you are visualizing, you want to visualize as though this has already happened. It's a memory. One thing that would trip me up in the beginning of my journey was I would visualize as though this is something that's going to happen in the future. Like this is a scene that will happen in 2 months or a month from now. And then you stay in a loop of this is going to happen 2 months from now or someday. Instead, you want this to feel like a memory. It has already happened. So if you've been struggling with visualization, I really hope that this takes some of the pressure off. You don't need a perfect mental movie. You don't need overwhelming emotion, and you don't need to get it right the first time or the second or third. What matters is choosing a scene that implies that your desire has already been fulfilled and giving yourself permission to return to it consistently. Because every time you do, you're becoming more familiar with the version of yourself who already has what you want. And familiarity is what allows that state to feel natural. So let me know in the comments if this video resonated with you and what you'd like for me to cover next. I'm also curious, what are you currently manifesting and what scenes are you going to use to imply that your wish is already fulfilled? Let's get into it in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. I will see you in the next video.